Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things and welcome to another video. And today we're back at my TBR shelf to talk about my reading plans for the month of May. I've been really enjoying doing monthly TBRs in 2024, even if I don't end up reading everything that I put on my TBR. So today I'm going to talk through my reading plans for May. And indeed, I'm going to work out my reading plans for May because I don't exactly know what I'm planning to read in May. I will also say before I get started that my TBR shelf is looking quite a bit smaller than it was in April. I have indeed managed, after the TBR Clear Out Readathon, to get rid of a lot of the bottom shelf. So this is now half historical reference, books about the 19th century, which is what I wanted, and half TBR, because I couldn't quite fit everything on the top shelf, and the top shelf is still a bit overfull. But my physical TBR is now down to 30 books, which feels much more manageable. My birthday is coming up in May, so maybe that is going to change, but I'm still feeling pretty happy with how the TBR clear out went and how my TBR is looking. I read many books in April. My April wrap up is probably not up yet, but will be up quite soon. But yeah, today let's work out what I'm going to read in May. So because I spent April focusing on reading books from my physical TBR, I am a little bit behind on where I want to be with my Walter Scott Prize for historical fiction reads. The Walter Scott Prize for historical fiction is a wonderful prize that I follow every year. Its long list is announced in February and its winner is announced in June. And I have read 6 books out of the 12 books long list, and the shortlist has actually just literally been announced. I have an email on my phone with the shortlist, but I haven't opened it yet. So we're going to open it together and I'll have a chat about my thoughts on the Walter Scott Prize shortlist and also my reading plans for it. And I'm going to try and read the whole shortlist in May, which may be 6 books if I happen to have read the half of the long list that didn't make it onto the shortlist, or maybe a lot less. The books that I have read so far for the Walter Scott Prize for historical fiction have been amazing, so I would be quite surprised if some of them aren't on the shortlist at least. So the 6 books that I have read from the Walter Scott Prize long list so far are Cuddy by Benjamin Myers, The New Life by Tom Crew, For Thy Great Pain Have Mercy on My Little Pain by Victoria Mackenzie, My Father's House by Joseph O'Connor, Hungry Ghost by Kevin Jarrett Hussain, and The House of Doors by Tam Twang Enge. Of those 6 books, my favourite to win is Cuddy by Benjamin Myers. I'm going to be devastated if Cuddy by Benjamin Myers has not made the shortlist, because it very much deserves to be, but we're going to see. So anyway, there are 6 books on the Walter Scott Prize long list that I haven't yet read, some of which I'm going to read whether they're on the shortlist or not, and some of which I might not read. So there's In the Upper Country by Kai Thomas, which I am really keen to read, and I've got a digital ARC of, so I think I'm going to read that whether or not it makes the shortlist. There's also Music in the Dark by Sally Magnuson, which is another priority for me. I've reserved that again at the library because I didn't get around to reading it in March, but that's one I'm going to be reading again whether or not it has made the shortlist. And then for the other 4, I think I'll make up my mind depending on whether or not they make the shortlist, and those 4 are The Fraud by Zadie Smith, Mr Timeless Blythe by Alan Spence, Absolutely and Forever by Rose Tremaine, and A Better Place by Stephen Daisley. So let me open the email and see what's on the Walter Scott Prize shortlist, and then I will decide what else I'm going to read in May along with my Walter Scott Prize reads. Oh my god, Cuddy's not on the shortlist! There are 6 books on the shortlist. I've read 4 of them. They are not the books I expected to be on the shortlist, by which I mean Cuddy is not on the shortlist, and I'm slightly devastated because I thought Cuddy was just one of the best works of historical fiction I've ever read in my life. I thought it was incredible, but anyway, I will live with the fact that Cuddy hasn't been shortlisted, just about. So on the shortlist we have 4 books I've already read, The New Life, Hungry Ghosts, My Father's House, and The House of Doors. I really liked all of those books. I would say that my favourite of the 4 would probably be The New Life. I think that would probably be my pick to win. I thought that was a fantastic novel. And then the other 2 books on the shortlist I haven't read, and those are In the Upper Country by Kai Thomas, which, as I said, I'm really keen to read, and also Absolutely and Forever by Rose Tremaine, which I was a bit more on the fence about. I've read one book by Rose Tremaine before, which I didn't completely love. I think her writing style is just a little bit too literary for me. But I think Absolutely and Forever is really short, and I don't think it's going to take me very long, so I think I probably will end up reading that. And that would take me to the end of the shortlist. I think I'm also going to read Music in the Dark, because I've reserved it at the library and I am really keen to read it. I'm probably going to end up leaving Mr. Timeless Blythe and A Better Place, but I might still read The Fraud. I don't know. Basically, I think a bit like with Rose Tremaine, I've read some Zadie Smith before, which I haven't massively got on with, because I think in general my taste is just a little bit more reading group than literary. But the books I've read from Zadie Smith before were not historical, so I might feel differently about this one. It's less of a priority now that it hasn't made the shortlist, but I think I'll just see how I go with the rest of my reading this month. I'm not over the fact that Cuddy hasn't made the shortlist for the Walter Scott Prize. I am, however, very excited to see In the Upper Country on there because I am really excited to read that one. So that'll probably be, yeah, my top priority for May for the Walter Scott Prize reads. Anyway, that leaves me with 3 Walter Scott Prize books that I definitely want to read in the month of May. In the Upper Country, Music in the Dark, and Absolutely and Forever, and then I may or may not read The Fraud, depending on how I go with the rest of my reading. And then there are also 2 readathons going on in May that I want to take part in. So the first readathon I want to take part in May is the Spoonies Readathon, which is hosted by Emily from Novelle Novels and Kat from Brews and Reviews. And the Spoonies Readathon is all about reading books with representation of disability and chronic illness. So I have 3 books that are sort of tentatively on my TBR for the Spoonies Readathon, but I'm also looking forward to watching lots of people's videos with recommendations during the month, and I also know that I have a few recommendations, videos and TBRs for the Spoonies Readathon in my Watch Later playlist that I haven't got to yet, so I might also get some other recommendations that will feed into my reading, and I am kind of keen to read more for the Spoonies Readathon than I currently have on my TBR. But I do have 3 books that I am hoping to get to, one of which is a classic, and that is The Daisy Chain by Charlotte Mary Young. This is a Victorian novel from 1856. I don't know very much about it, but I do know that disability is quite an important theme in it. I read a wonderful work of non-fiction a few years ago called Plotting Disability in the 19th Century Novel, which spoke about quite a lot of 19th century novels that looked at disability in an interesting way, and I've read nearly all the novels that were mentioned in that book, except for The Daisy Chain, which I haven't yet read. I've read one other book by Charlotte Mary Young, The Heir of Redcliffe, which I really enjoyed, and I know she's an author who writes quite a lot about disability, so I'm really interested to read The Daisy Chain, and hopefully I'll enjoy it. I kind of don't want to know more about it than that. I really enjoy going into Victorian novels not knowing very much, so I'm looking forward to that one. I've also reserved at the library Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This is a book I keep hearing about, and everyone seems to love it a lot. I gather it's a kind of story about friendship and 2 friends who kind of meet and bond through making video games, and I believe one of the characters has chronic pain following a car crash. I believe he walked to the walking aid as well. I feel like Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is one of those books I've heard everyone say is amazing, but I feel like I don't have a good sense of what it's about and what it's like, but I'm very intrigued to go into it, and I'm really looking forward to it. And then finally, I thought the Spoonies Readathon would be a good opportunity to read more by Talia Hibbert, who is a wonderful romance writer. I've read the first 2 books in her Brown Sisters series, Get a Life, Chloe Brown, Take a Hint, Danny Brown, and I want to finally read this month Actual Ave, Eve Brown, which is about the other Brown sister and is a romance novel. I kind of don't know more about it than that, but Emily from Novelle Novels mentioned it in her recommendations video, so I'm looking forward to reading this one. As I said, I do want to read more for the Spoonies Readathon, so if anyone has any recommendations, that would be really helpful. I'm kind of especially keen to read books with representations of chronic pain, or like walking problems or using a walking aid. I have a long-term knee injury. I always feel a bit hesitant about saying I have chronic pain because my instinct is to be like, it's not that bad, and a lot of the time it's not that bad, but sometimes it is really bad. I do occasionally use a walking aid. Basically, I carry a fold-up walking stick around with me like for emergencies, but I don't really need to use it that often. The other month I was reading The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters, and there is a character in it who has a leg injury and who was undergoing a treatment for this, and I found that really, really fascinating, and I found myself like really keen to read about that, and that made me think I was looking for specific representation around my like knee injury that I hadn't found and didn't know I was looking for until I read The Little Stranger and got very obsessed with how Roderick's knee was being treated. Anyway, that's a side point. This is a very rambly TBR. Anyway, the other readathon that I want to take part in May is Misery May, and Misery May is a readathon which, as it says on the tin, is all about reading miserable books, and I've actually got quite a lot of books that are either on my physical TBR or on my audiobook TBR that I think are going going to be quite miserable. It can be a bit hard to tell before starting a book, but I have a pretty good indication that these books are going to be quite sad, so I thought I would pull these together into a little pile of possibilities. So we'll start off with a couple of classics, and finally it's going to be worth me sitting by my TBR shelf, because the first book I want to tell you about is this. This is Demos by George Gissing. I think it's a pretty safe bet to say that any George Gissing book is going to be pretty miserable. I don't know too much about Demos. I believe it's from 1886, and the subtitle is A Story of English Socialism, so I guess it's going to be about late Victorian socialism, and I just know it's going to be miserable because it's George Gissing, and I'm really looking forward to it. George Gissing feels like a very appropriate pick for Misery May. And then another classic I have on audiobook is The Well of Loneliness by Radcliffe Hall, which, with a title like The Well of Loneliness, I'm presuming is going to be a bit sad. The Well of Loneliness is from 1927 and is a queer classic, and that's kind of all I know about it, but I've been meaning to read it for a long time, and I have it on audiobook, so I feel like Misery May is a good time to get to it. And then I have 3 books from my physical TBR, so when I picked up Demos earlier, I also grabbed this from the shelf. This is The Hollow Sea by Annie Kirby, which was on my April TBR and I failed to read. The blurb says, when Scotty realises she may never become a mother, she makes the heartbreaking decision to flee to the remote North Atlantic archipelago of St. Haya. So that sounds like it's going to be quite sad, and I just get the vibe from this book that it may be a Misery May book. We will see, but hopefully I'll get to it in May. Then I also have 2 other books I was thinking might be good for this. One is this is The Way It Breaks by Polis Loizou, and this novel is set in Cyprus and is apparently about a young man who refuses to accept his lot in life. From the title and the cover, I just feel like this is going to be a sad book, so I feel like this one is a good one for Misery May too. Finally, I have also heard that Wandering Souls by Cecile Pinn is a very sad book, so I thought I might pick this up too. This novel is about some siblings that flee Vietnam after the Vietnam War, their struggles to find a home, and what happens when they end up in Britain, and I've heard very, very good things about this, so I think I'll hopefully get to this in May as well. And then finally, one other book I have on audiobook is Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason, which from the title sounds like it could be quite a sorrowful read, and I believe is about a woman struggling with long-term mental health issues and what happens when she ends up living with her parents again after a long time away from home. I've been meaning to read this one for a while, so hopefully I'll get to it in May. So those are the 2 readathons that I want to take part in May, and then I also have one read-along, my own read-along, part of the Mega Dickens read-along. I'm going to be reading A Tale of Two Cities. I'll be listening to this on audiobook rather than reading this physical edition. I've already started listening to the audiobook narrated by Simon Callow, which is great. This is a Dickens novel, a work of historical fiction written in the Victorian period but set during the French Revolution. I've read it 2 or 3 times before and I really love it, and I'm very excited to get stuck into it again in May. So that brings me up to 13 or 14 books, depending on whether or not I pick up The Fraud, which, to be honest, seems like more than enough books, but I might just pick something else out of my TBR jar anyway, just in case, because I do always like to have a big pile of possibilities. What I had picked out is The Way It Breaks, which is already on my TBR, so let's pick out another one. What I have picked it out is The Lifted Veil, okay, which is this massive folio society edition of women's 19th century short stories. Am I going to get to this month? We will see, but I might try. I've been meaning to read it for a while, and maybe I'll just read some of the short stories. Anyway, I think that pretty much covers my reading plans for May. Lots of different books and lots of possibilities. Do let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books, if there's any you think I should prioritise, because, you know, I'm not going to get to all of these books. I never do when I make a TBR. It's always a pile of possibilities for me. Also, do let me know if you have any recommendations for the Spoonies Readathon, or if you spot anything else on my TBR that you think might be good for the Spoonies Readathon or for Misery May. Otherwise, that's all for now. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.